Hello and welcome back for the second part of this week's topics. We are now going to switch forces and talk about social responsibility in business. So social responsibility is the recognition that business activities have an impact on society, and the consideration of that impact in business-making decision needs to happen. Social responsibility can cost companies a considerable amount of money, but it's also good business. So we're going to take kind of a deeper look at that. So examples of social responsibility, and you have to ask the question is it worth the cost to the company? Target, for example, has donated $1 billion towards public education. Target Support has provided books, school supplies, food, field trips, and more to students and schools throughout the United States and around the world. And so by donating that money, Target is building their brand and building their reputation. Procter & Gamble is also a good example. It has a thing called Loads of Hope, and its trucks take disaster victims, it takes their victims' dirty laundry, washes it, and returns it to them clean and folded. This program has actually done more than 55,000 loads of laundry for communities throughout the United States. Even small businesses can develop social responsibility programs. Another example that I put on there is would not be considered a major airline, but it's one that has broken into the market, and that's JetBlue. And JetBlue has a wealth of social responsibility programs and has really kind of touted that they're the environmentally clean airline, that they give back to the community, they give to causes that their employees believe in. So we need to take a look about corporate citizenship. And this is adapting a strategic approach to fulfilling an economic, ethical, environmental, and social responsibilities. So for example, at General Elective, being a good corporate citizen is more than a program or a set of good intentions. It's a full-time commitment to finding sustainable solutions to benefit both our planet, our people, and our economy. It's embedded within the culture of the organization and within the business strategy. It's working to solve some of the world's biggest challenges, and it inspires thinking and drives actions. So what is this evolution of social responsibility? How did we get to this point that it's almost expected of businesses to engage in social responsibility? So during the first quarter of the 20th century, businesses were free to operate pretty much as they chose. Working conditions were often what we would consider deplorable by our standards today. The average work week exceeded 60 hours in most industries. There was no minimum wage law. There were no employee benefits, and work areas were crowded and unsafe. And you tended to have a lot of industrial accidents. Those actually became the rule rather than the exception. So during this period, consumers were generally subject to the doctrine of let the buyer beware. So victims of unscrupulous business practices could take legal action, but going to court was usually very expensive, and consumers rarely won their cases. And there were no consumer groups or government agencies to hold sellers responsible for their activities. So prior to the 1930s, government became involved in day-to-day business activities only when there was an obvious abuse of the free market system and competition was endangered. The collapse of the stock market in October 29, 1929, triggered that Great Depression, and years of economic problems unfolded for the United States. Public pressure mounted for governments to actually do something about the economy and about worsening social conditions. And as a result, laws were passed to correct what many viewed as monopolistic abuses of big business, and various social services were provided for individuals at that time. As government involvement increased, so has everybody's awareness of the social responsibility of business. So we basically have two views of social responsibility. Government regulation and public awareness are external forces that have increased the social responsibility of business. But business decisions are made within the firm. And therefore, social responsibility begins with the attitude of the management of the firm. And there are two models of social responsibility. You have the economic model. And the economic model says that society will benefit most when businesses are left alone to produce and market profitable products that society actually needs. And then you have the second model, which is the socioeconomic model. And it holds that businesses should emphasize not only profits, but also the impact of its decisions on society. So what are the pros and cons of social responsibility? So the merits of the economic and socioeconomic models have been debated for years, and each side seems to have 4 different arguments. So arguments for increased social responsibility. These are the proponents of the socioeconomic model, and they offer the following arguments. Businesses cannot ignore social issues because business is part of society. Business has the technical, financial, and managerial resources needed to tackle today's complex social issues. By helping to resolve social issues, businesses can create a more stable environment for long-term profitability. And socially responsible decision-making by business firms can prevent increased government intervention, which would force businesses to do what they fail to do voluntarily. So what are the arguments against increased social responsibility? So these are the ones that would tend to favor the more economic model of the economic view of social responsibility. Business managers are responsible primarily to their stakeholders. We hear this all the time in business, right? That our number one responsibility is to our stockholders and our stakeholders and to maximize profit. So management must be concerned with providing a return on the owner's investment. And sometimes social responsibility, like we said earlier, costs a lot of money. So sometimes your own stockholders don't want you to engage in social responsibility. So corporate time, money, and talent should always be used to maximize profits, not to solve society's problems. Social problems that affect society in general. So individual businesses should not be expected to solve these problems. Social issues are the responsibility of government officials who are elected for that purpose and who are accountable to the voters for their decision. Today, few firms are either purely economic or purely socioeconomic in outlook. Most have chosen to actually take a middle ground between the two. However, our society generally seems to want and even expect some degree of social responsibility from business. Thus, within the middle ground between these two extremes, businesses are tending to lean more towards the socioeconomic view. So what is the public responsibility? Consumerism consists of all those activities that are undertaken to protect the rights of the consumer. The consumer movement falls into 3 different categories: environmental protection, product performance and safety, and information disclosure. So you have the basic rights of consumers. So during the 1960s, President John F. Kennedy declared that the consumer was entitled to a Bill of Rights, and these became the basic rights of consumer. So as a consumer, you are entitled to the right to safety, and this specifies that products purchased by consumers must be safe for their intended use, include thorough and explicit directions for proper use, and be tested by the manufacturer to ensure product quality and reliability. American business firms must be concerned about product safety for several reasons. Federal agents have the power to force businesses that make or sell defective products to take corrective action. You see this all the time in the recalls that come out, whether it's on baby products or automobiles. It's the federal government stepping in and saying you need to fix your defective product. Consumer and the government has been winning an increasing number of product liability lawsuits against sellers of defective products. One that sticks out in my mind is years ago, there was a lady who ordered a coffee going through McDonald's and drank it and burned herself. It was very hot. And she sued McDonald's, and it became, you know, where McDonald's actually had to put a label on their coffee that contents may be hot. So really the consumers have a lot of power and control over how products are consumed from businesses. And the consumer also has the right to demand a safe product. The next one is the right to be informed. And this means that consumers have the right and must have access to complete information about the product before they buy it. In addition, manufacturers must inform consumers about potential dangers of using their products. Then you have the right to choose. The right to choose means that consumers have a choice of products offered by different manufacturers and sellers to satisfy a particular need. So the government has encouraged competition through the antitrust legislation. Competition and resulting freedom of choice provide additional benefit to consumer because it actually drives the prices down. So the more products that are on the market that are that meet the same needs, it will actually go to drive the price of those products down. Consumers also have the right to be heard. The right to be heard means that someone will listen and take appropriate action when consumers complain. Today, businesses are listening even more attentively, and many larger firms have consumer relations departments that can easily be contacted via toll-free telephone numbers or on the websites. And most large cities and some states have consumer affairs offices that actually will act upon consumer complaints. We have a couple additional consumer rights that have been added since JFK actually set the bill in place. In 1974, President Ford added the right to consumer education, and this entitles people to be fully informed about their rights as consumer. In 1994, President Clinton added the sixth right, the right to service, which entitles consumers to convenience, courtesy, and responsiveness from manufacturers and suppliers. So we have major consumer forces going on. And these have come basically through federal regulation. Most major federal laws that have been passed since 1960 to protect the consumer rights are listed and described in your chapter under table 2-4. But we also have to be concerned about the public health. Many people believe that businesses have a basic responsibility to contribute to the general well-being of the public, starting with ensuring that their products that do not harm anybody. Another public health topic facing businesses relates to smoking and tobacco products. In recent years, the marketing of e-cigarettes has elicited much controversy. And also another public health issue that has come up is when we had that craze a few years ago where they actually had to list all the calories that are in your product. So now when you go to a fast food restaurant, you actually look up at the menu and actually see how many calories you will be ingesting, which is never fun if you're craving a cinnamon crunch bagel from Panera and you're looking at what you're about to ingest. It almost makes it not worth ingesting those calories. So employment practices. Everyone who works for a living should have the opportunity to land a job for which he or she is qualified for and to be rewarded on the basis of ability and performance. Although this is an important issue for society, over the years, this opportunity has been denied to many members of various minority groups. So what is a minority? A minority is a racial, religious, political, national, or other group regarded as different from the larger group of which it's a part, and that it is often singled out for unfavorable treatment. So the federal government also responds to the outcry of minority groups as well during the 1960s and the 1970s by passing a number of laws forbidding discrimination within the workplace. Now, more than 50 years after the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, abuses still exist in the workplace. There is a disparity between income levels for whites, blacks, Hispanics, and Asians, and this can be shown in figure 2-3 of your textbook. Lower incomes and higher unemployment rates also affect Native Americans, disabled people, and women. Responsible managers have instituted several programs to counteract the results of discrimination. We also have affirmative action programs. So an affirmative action program is a plan designed to increase the number of minority employees at all levels within an organization. Employers with federal contracts of more than $50,000 per year must have written affirmative action plans. The objectives of such programs are to ensure that minorities are represented within an organization in approximately the same proportion as in the surrounding community that the organization operates in. Now, these programs have actually been plagued by two main central problems. The first problem involves quotas. So in the beginning, many firms pledged to recruit and hire a certain number of minority members by a specific date. To achieve this goal, they were forced to consider only minority applicants for job openings. However, the courts have now ruled that such quotas are unconstitutional, even though their purpose is commendable. The second problem is that not all business people are in favor of affirmative action programs, although most programs have been reasonably successful. Congress created the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, a government agency with the power to investigate complaints of employment discrimination and sue firms that actually practice it. The threat of legal action has persuaded some corporations to amend their hiring and promotional practices, but the discrepancy between men and women's salaries still exists in the workplace. Programs are also have been established to reduce sexual harassment and abusive behavior. And this is another hot button issue in the workplace that is going on today. Another one could be bullying in the workplace. And this is defined as work sabotage, verbal abuse, or abusive conduct that is threatening, humiliating, or intimidating. To create a work environment that stifles bullying, sexual harassment, and other abusive conduct, managers need to provide programs that foster more ethical conduct within the workplace. The next main thing that social responsibility has to do within business is environmental concerns. So the waste that is actually produced in businesses and society is a major environmental issue. Another environmental issue is pollution, which is the contamination of water, air, and land through the actions of people in an industrialized society. For several decades, environmentalists have been warning us about the dangers of industrial pollution. And unfortunately, businesses and government leaders either ignore the problem or weren't concerned about the problem until it became a threat to the life and health of America. Today, American expects businesses and government leaders to take swift action to clean up the environment and keep it clean. So pollution, one thing that comes to mind when you think about pollution are the major oil spills that have taken place, off the Gulf Coast of Mexico, and its effects on the environment around it and the sea life around it as well. The effects of environmental legislation. As in other areas of concern to our society, legislation and regulations play a critical role in pollution control. The EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is the federal agency charged with enforcing laws designed to actually protecting the environment. Some business owners and managers take the position that environmental standards are too strict. Consequently, it has often been necessary for the EPA to take legal action to force firms to install anti-pollution equipment and clean up waste storage areas. Experience has shown that the combination of environmental legislation, voluntary compliance, and EPA action can actually succeed in cleaning up the environment and keeping it clean. So how should businesses respond to environmental concerns? One of the most effective ways that companies can reduce their impact on the environment is to reduce the waste from its operation and other activities. This can happen through recycling, which involves converting used materials into products or components for new products in order to prevent their unnecessary disposal. Another way for businesses to strive to be environmentally conscious is through the use of greener forms of power to counter their huge quantities of energy during operations. Green marketing is the process of creating, marketing, delivering, and promoting products that are environmentally safe. You will see this on household cleaners when you go to the grocery store. Anything that has a green label makes you feel like if you actually use this product, that you're helping the environment. You will learn in marketing management that sometimes these products are just marketed in this way and that they actually don't have a social responsibility plan in action. So that's something that you might want to research if you like a particular product that claims to be socially responsible or concerned about the environment to actually make sure that they're living up to their end of the bargain. The big question is, who will pay for all this environmental cleanup? Business leaders believe that tax money should be used to clean up the environment. And environmentalists believe that the cost of proper treatment and disposal of industrial waste is an expense of doing business, and therefore is the responsibility of the manufacturer. In either case, consumers will be the ones paying the large part of the cost, either in the form of taxes or in the form of higher prices. So implementing a program of social responsibility requires the following. It requires a commitment of your top executives. Without the commitment of the top executives, any program will falter and basically become ineffective. It also takes planning. A committee of managers should be appointed to plan the program. And of those people, you should actually appoint a director. So the director should be a top-level executive that should be appointed to implement the organization's plan of social responsibility. And then the organization should also undertake the social audit. A social audit is a comprehensive report of what an organization has done and is doing in regards to social issues that affect it. So one thing I really want you to take away from this part of the chapter is that businesses actually, even though it costs money to invest in a social responsibility plan, it can actually be very lucrative for the business as well. You will see this through people identifying with specific businesses because they carry those same values that the consumer does as well. So think about that when you spend the rest of your week, you know, whether you're watching TV, look at advertising, and think about how companies are actually advertising that they are socially responsible throughout their business operations. And how does that make you feel about that company? Are you more inclined to buy from them or not? So that's just something I would like you to think about this week.